"Daddy, should I tell them what you said about God?" Elon Musk froze as his 5-year-old son whispered those words on live TV. What followed wasn't scripted, wasn't planned, and shook millions to their core. A moment meant for bedtime became a global reckoning. But what did the boy reveal that left even Elon speechless? Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. Bright lights flooded the studio, reflecting off polished cameras and chrome accents. Elon Musk sat upright on a modern blue couch, the tailored lines of his blazer sharp against the soft upholstery. He adjusted it once more, glanced at the host's teleprompter, then turned toward the small boy beside him. X, barely 5, wore mismatched socks and held a stuffed toy rocket close to his chest. His legs swung freely beneath the cushion, not quite reaching the floor, his shoes tapping softly against one another with a quiet, rhythmic beat. Across from them, the host, Jenny, flashed a polished smile. Her voice was chipper as she welcomed the audience and began reading lighthearted questions from her cue cards. "So, Elon, tell us, what's bedtime like in the Musk household?" Elon offered a tight smile, replying with a rehearsed joke about space-themed pajamas and Lego-filled floors. Then came silence. Bex leaned toward his father, resting his chin on Elon's arm, his voice soft but picked up by the microphone clipped to his collar. "Daddy," he whispered, "should I tell them what you said? About God?" Elon stiffened. The air changed. The host's smile faltered just slightly. The cameraman adjusted focus, unsure what was happening. The segment meant to showcase bedtime routines and fatherhood now hovered on the edge of something unplanned. Something deep. Jenny chuckled nervously, trying to maintain flow, but even she sensed the shift. Elon blinked at his son, lips parted, unsure what to say. The boy didn't notice the tension. He simply swung his legs, waiting for his father's answer. What was meant to be light conversation now teetered on the edge of something sacred. X sat upright now, the stuffed rocket resting quietly in his lap. He looked toward the camera, not with stage fright, but with the stillness of a child who didn't know the weight of the moment he was stepping into. With calm, unhurried certainty, he leaned into his microphone and said, "My daddy says God gave something special to everyone, even people who don't believe." The studio froze. Even the faint hum of machinery seemed to disappear. The host's pen slipped slightly from her hand. Elon blinked, his breath catching in his throat. He hadn't expected that sentence. Not here, not now, not for the world to hear. It was something he had said in private weeks ago, lying under the stars in their backyard, never meant for microphones or headlines. X wasn't finished. "Hal said his job is to build things," the boy continued gently, "but also to wonder where all the ideas come from." The control room lit up, producers scrambling, phones buzzing, social media exploding as the clip went viral in real time. Elon stared at his son, speechless. He had prepared for data, innovation, but not for this. He had engineered rockets, but not this kind of launch. And there was no flight plan for what came next. Elon Musk had always believed in questions, but not the kind you couldn't measure. As a child, he was the one dismantling radios, not praying for answers. He had once sat in a quiet church pew beside his mother, fidgeting, confused, and asking why no one seemed to be doing anything. By the time he was a teenager, he had traded hymns for hypotheses. God became a distant concept, something interesting in theory, but less compelling than circuitry and stars. His career reflected that shift. PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, each built brick by brick on reason, innovation, data, not doctrine. He told interviewers that he didn't oppose religion, he simply didn't see its function. Science was his church. engineering his form of worship. Control was everything. Then came X. From the time he could talk, Elon's son asked questions that didn't fit into neat scientific boxes. "Why are stars quiet?" he once asked, while pointing at the sky. Another time, "Does God know math?" They were questions Elon had no interest in dismissing, but didn't know how to answer either. His mother, May, once told him during a quiet moment, "Even the smartest minds need something to believe in. Not everything can be solved." At the time, he had nodded politely, but something in her tone had stayed with him. Now, hearing X repeat those same bedtime reflections on live television, Elon realized how deeply those seeds had taken root. He wasn't raising a prophet. He had just hoped to raise a thinker. But maybe the lines between the two weren't as separate as he once believed. And as he sat beside his son, who spoke to the world with unflinching innocence, Elon couldn't escape the truth. He had launched rockets across galaxies. But this moment was taking him further than any of them ever had. The moment X finished speaking, the air inside the studio seemed to shift. Elon Musk, still seated beside his son, gave a small, nervous chuckle and cleared his throat. "Well, that was unexpected," he said, glancing sideways at the host, Jenny. She smiled politely, waiting to see where he would take the moment. Elon adjusted his blazer and added, "We talk a lot at home about ideas, about imagination. X is a very curious thinker." It was an elegant sidestep, safe, measured, the kind of redirect his PR team would have applauded. But X didn't blink. He kept swinging his feet and turned to the host, saying in a voice both soft and certain, "Sometimes, when I look at the stars, I feel like someone's listening." The studio hushed again. Jenny tilted her head gently. "That's a beautiful thought, X. Elon, do you believe in God?" Elon froze. Of all the questions to come up in a televised interview, this was the one he'd tried to avoid his entire public life. He had answered questions about rockets, AI, electric cars, space colonization. But this one? It wasn't about facts. It was about faith. He started, then stopped. His eyes flicked toward the control booth. No cues came. Just cameras, lights, and silence. Then X spoke again, not interrupting, but filling the pause with something warmer than words. "You told me it's okay not to have all the answers," he said, his eyes locked on his father. "Remember, Daddy? You said it when we were on the grass looking up." Jenny looked between them, visibly moved. The cameraman zoomed in slightly on Elon, whose expression was caught somewhere between surprise and surrender. His usual poise faltered. "I did say that," Elon said quietly. He wasn't ready for this moment. He hadn't prepared a response or mapped out the emotional terrain. But here it was, delivered not by a journalist or scientist, but by a child whose mind held room for both rockets and reverence. "It's true," Elon continued slowly. "I've told my son that asking questions is more important than pretending to have all the answers." The words hung in the air. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed a different emotion, one he rarely allowed the public to see: vulnerability. Jenny nodded respectfully. "That's a powerful lesson. For all of us." The cameras kept rolling. Behind the scenes, social media erupted again. Clips were already circulating of X's comment, and now this exchange. Elon Musk fumbling through the same questions so many parents face under the heat of the spotlight. "I don't claim to have certainty about things that can't be measured," Elon said after a pause. "But I do know this. When your child speaks to you like that, with wonder and conviction, you listen." He reached over and gently placed a hand on X's knee. The boy smiled. No more words needed to be said, but the message had been sent and received by millions. This wasn't the controlled, sanitized segment Elon's team had envisioned. It was messy, emotional, real. And as the cameras lingered on the father and son, it became clear. Elon wasn't ready to answer, but his son already had. Backstage, the room buzzed with the kind of urgency Elon Musk normally reserved for rocket launches. But this wasn't mission control. It was a talk show's green room turned crisis center. His phone screen was a blur of notifications. Twitter was flooded with clips of X's words. News outlets from every corner of the world had already picked up the segment. Hashtags like God and Musk and X Speaks were trending globally. His publicist, Sarah, paced nearby, phone pressed to her ear, barking orders and brushing off interview requests. "Elon, we have to respond," she said, pulling the phone away just long enough to make eye contact. "CNN wants a statement. So does the BBC. Churches are calling. A bishop from South Africa wants to quote X in a sermon." Elon didn't answer. He sat silently, staring at a monitor replaying the moment from earlier. His son, small and sincere, saying into a live microphone, "My daddy says God gave something special to everyone, even people who don't believe." He rubbed his temples slowly, trying to process it all. "He's 5, Elon whispered. "He doesn't understand the weight of what he said." Sarah lowered her voice. "Maybe not, but the world does, and they're not going to let this go." The footage looped again, X swinging his legs, voice clear and calm. Elon closed his eyes, trying to remember exactly when that conversation had taken place. Weeks ago? No, longer. They had been lying in the grass one night, just the two of them, looking up at the stars. That's when he'd said it. Offhand, philosophical. Maybe God is the biggest question. He never thought X was listening that closely. Elon looked up. Across the room, X sat on the floor, completely unbothered by the media storm raging just beyond the studio walls. He was building a Lego rocket, carefully snapping the pieces together, tongue poking out slightly in concentration. There was a peace in that small scene that made Elon's chest tighten. He leaned back in his chair, thinking. His whole life had been built around facts, around precision, equations, code, metal, speed. Every venture he had launched, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, was rooted in control, systems, proof. He had walked away from faith as a teenager because it offered too many unprovable claims. He needed something he could replicate, measure, improve. And yet, here was his son, 5 years old, unintimidated by the mystery of it all, unbothered by the consequences, just speaking what was in his heart, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I told him it's okay not to have all the answers," Elon murmured, more to himself than to Sarah, "and now he's living it." Sarah gave him a look, half sympathy, half urgency. "The more you stay silent, the more people fill in their own version of what this means." He nodded faintly, still watching his son. What was it about that moment that unraveled him so much? Was it the unexpected truth? Or the realization that X had remembered something Elon had said in passing and carried it like a banner into the world? Maybe it wasn't that X didn't understand the weight of what he said. Maybe he understood it more than anyone else. Elon leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching X raise the nose cone of the rocket skyward. He wasn't trying to cause a media frenzy. He wasn't trying to teach theology. He was just wondering out loud. Sometimes the smallest voice asks the question no one else dares to. On the third day after the interview, Elon finally called Sarah back. "I'll do it," he said, voice low. Sarah didn't ask him to clarify. She knew he meant the invitation from Cathedral of Hope, the small church in Dallas that had offered to host a dialogue, not a sermon. No theology, no creeds, just a conversation between a father and his son about science, belief, and questions too big for answers. When Elon and X arrived at the venue, there were no crosses on the walls, just a wide projection screen with stars drifting slowly across a deep navy sky. The audience was already seated, mothers with children, young tech workers, elderly couples, a few nuns, a few men in lab coats. It was as if belief and skepticism had called a truce for one afternoon. The lights dimmed, a stage manager gestured. Elon looked at X. "You good?" James nodded, clutching his half-built Lego rocket. They stepped onto the small stage. 2 chairs, one tall, one short. The applause was soft but steady, respectful, curious. Elon sat first, then helped X up beside him. The boy's legs didn't reach the floor. A microphone waited. Elon reached for it, then paused. "I didn't come here today to explain my beliefs," he began slowly, the words surprising even him. "I came here because of this kid." He glanced at X, who was busy attaching a tiny blue wing to the side of his rocket. "A few nights ago, he said something that made its way around the world. I didn't expect it. I didn't plan it. But it happened. And what I've realized in the days since is this. We don't talk enough about wonder anymore." The room stilled. At home, we talk a lot about ideas. Big ones. About black holes, atoms, quantum entanglement. But we also talk about things we can't prove. Questions we can't answer. And I've always told X that it's okay not to know. X looked up at him, wide-eyed, and he remembered. Elon's voice caught for a moment. All reminded me that the biggest questions might not be meant to be solved, just asked, out loud, without fear. The audience remained silent, listening, breathing. Then X leaned toward the mic, voice soft. "I just like when you talk to me about the stars." A collective exhale washed through the room. One woman in the second row dabbed her eyes. A father in the back reached for his daughter's hand. Elon looked at his son, then back to the audience. "That's all this is, a kid asking his dad about the stars. And somehow, that cracked something open in the world." He set the mic down. They sat there, not speaking, just sitting. A father, a son, a conversation without edges. And in that sacred stillness, it was clear. This wasn't a debate or a doctrine. It was permission. Permission to not know. Permission to ask. Permission to feel lost in a universe too vast for certainty and love it anyway. The applause, when it finally came, wasn't loud. It was reverent. Elon didn't give a speech. He gave permission to wonder. Backstage after the event, the lights dimmed, and the quiet of the room replaced the earlier hum of conversation. Elon sat on a folding chair beside his son, still feeling the weight of the moment they had just shared. He stared at his hands, remembering what he had just said into the mic moments earlier. "I've spent my life building, but my son reminded me that asking matters too." It echoed in his head, not like a quote or a headline, but like a truth he'd been running from for years. X was sitting cross-legged on the floor nearby, his head bent over a piece of paper, markers scattered around him. Elon didn't ask what he was drawing. He just watched, silently. After a few minutes, X stood up and walked over, holding the paper out. "I made this for you," he said. Elon took it gently and looked down. In the drawing, a large figure with a peaceful face floated in the stars, arms outstretched. In one hand, he held a small Earth. In the other, a rocket ship. Below the image, X had written in unsteady, careful letters, "God made science too." Elon stared at it, heart catching in his throat. He blinked, hard, but the tears still came. He hadn't expected that. "Buddy," he whispered, voice barely steady. "This is beautiful." X shrugged shyly. "I just thought you might want to keep it." Elon looked up at him, eyes shining. "Thank you." he said softly, hugging the paper to his chest like it was more valuable than anything he'd ever invented. "Thank you for reminding me. I don't have to know everything." X leaned into his side, resting his small head on Elon's shoulder. "I think questions are kind of like stars," X said. "Even when you don't get close to them, they still help you see." Elon let that settle in. The quiet in the room felt sacred. Not religious, not philosophical, just real. It wasn't about answers anymore. It was about holding the space to wonder. And maybe that was enough. Because what if faith and science were never meant to fight, but to dance? The cameras had stopped. The headlines had shifted. And at home, things finally returned to something quieter, something slower. No interviews, no press releases, no social media posts. Just evenings filled with calm conversation and soft stargazing in the backyard. Elon and X would lie side by side on a blanket, the telescope nearby but often unused. They talked about the shapes of clouds, the colors of planets, and the things that made them wonder. No one asked for answers here. They laughed easily now without the pressure of an audience. X still carried his stuffed rocket. Elon still carried the drawing, God holding planets and a rocket. It sat framed on a shelf near his desk, untouched but not unnoticed. One night, as a breeze moved gently through the trees, X rested his head on Elon's chest. The stars glowed above, scattered like questions on a page. "Dad?" X asked quietly. "Yeah, buddy? Do you think the stars listen to us too?" Elon looked up into the night sky. The question didn't need a scientific answer. It needed something slower, something more sacred. "I think," Elon said gently, "if they do, they'd be proud of you." X smiled, closing his eyes. Elon didn't try to say more. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of connection, wonder, peace. Above them, the stars shimmered, distant and eternal. And beside him, Elon felt the steady rhythm of his son's breathing. A tiny hand reached over and found his. They stayed there a while. No speeches, no conclusions. Just the hum of a world that suddenly didn't feel so unknowable. Not everything had to be solved. Some things were meant to be held. Like questions. Like children. Like moments that feel too big for language. For the first time in a long time, Elon Musk no longer feared the unknown. He welcomed it. Later that week, Elon opened his phone, not to check headlines, not to respond to inquiries, but simply to share something that felt true. He posted a single photo, X sitting beneath a vast night sky, Lego rocket resting in his lap. Eyes lifted toward the stars. There was no filter, no caption filled with data or spin, just 4 quiet words. Let them wonder. No further explanation, no follow-up. It wasn't needed. That image, soft and simple, began circulating again. But this time not as a viral spectacle, rather as a gentle reminder that sometimes the greatest wisdom begins not with answers, but with the courage to ask out loud, not to prove anything, not to win, but to connect. In classrooms, parents showed their children the clip. In sanctuaries and science labs, people paused, not to choose sides, but to listen more softly. And maybe that was the point all along. If this story touched something in you, if it stirred a memory, a question, a moment you've long forgotten, don't rush past it. Subscribe for more inspiring stories about love, faith, and the moments that change everything. Because maybe, just maybe, the world needs more wonder. When was the last time you looked at the stars and just asked,